All right, so I'm going to be doing this yunomi demo using the coil and throw method. The throwing part of this is totally optional. So if you haven't thrown before, absolutely welcome to give it a shot. You don't have to do that part of it. It's a little challenging, especially with something that's only this big and only has so much momentum. If you are going to do the coiling, these big blue ones are the best ones. The smaller ones will work well too, but you might have to have somebody that's going like this for you, which is like, I'll pull it out later. There's a picture in that book of somebody building a coil pot this big, some dude laying on the ground kicking the wheel. Right? So that's actually how they did it before there was machines. Of course, they had water power too, but when you have people, why not? So, so I'm going to show that, and I'll talk about other ways you can kind of finish this off, and then I'll talk about maybe an optional decoration method. So I got a couple examples out from previous classes. I put the jar out just because, you know, you want to go big. That's a good place to try to go. That wood-fired jar that came out of our Anagama earlier this year, or late last year, and then the wood-fired cup at the end. All the same method. So you can do that. So I just wedged this clay, but I want to remind you to wedge your clay. I'm going to tear off a piece that's a little smaller than what I was working with the T-bowls. That's probably still too much, but that's all right. So I've wedged this. I'm going to start by making a little sausage out of it. And then I'm going to divide it roughly into thirds. This first third is going to be the base. So like with the T-bowls, if you want to have a nice thick base, get a little more clay for the base so you can carve out a lot. If you want to have a nice low profile base, use a little. Or just use a lot and carve it all off anyway. That works too. So I'll get this back into spherical shape. I'm going to put it down on my banding wheel and just kind of smoosh it into flat pancake. So it'll be on the lower profile side of things. Get that nice and even. And it's not round, and you can leave it like that if you want to, or if you want to make it round, you just go in with a wooden knife. Oops. Trim that off. That was kind of a cruddy demo. Cool. So now I've got my little round puck that's going to be my base. Put this back in here. So with the rest of this then, let's go by maybe half at a time. I'm going to start rolling out coils. Who's done a coil pot before? A couple folks? Okay, so you started probably by squishing it into like a hot dog shape, and then you kind of rolled it out on the table. You can totally do that. This is another method of making coils. And you'll see this, it's fairly traditional. Kind of start with a thick carrot, maybe a little smaller than that for your first one. And what we're going to do is we're going to rock, do it down here, rock our hands back and forth. They're kind of V-shaped like that. And I'm kind of going like this, not just straight back and forth. So kind of rocking back and forth. And you should have a coil come out of the bottom. And if you're really good, it will be more uniform. And if you're not, after you finish it off, fix it on the table. And rolling it on the table, I've got my fingers kind of on the table, and I'm rolling back and forth using my palm. You can also use your fingers and kind of like start narrow widen them out to get it nice and uniform. We'll start with that. There's lunch. Okay, so then we've got the coil. I'm going to take the coil, I'm going to start to lay it down. I'll smoosh one end down, lay it down on top of my puck. The clay right now is wet enough that I don't need to slip and spore all this stuff together. I can just kind of smush it together. It will get totally smushed together when we do the coil part, or pinching if you decide to do that. So I've got my coil laid down. Next thing I'm going to do is incorporate it into the base. So on the inside, I'm going to kind of smush it down. You can also use the end of one of these wooden knives as a modeling tool. Kind of smush down like we did some of the other stuff. Smushing down, incorporating that, smoothing it out. So the inside kind of looks like that. And on the outside, you can go up or down. I feel like it's a little easier to go down, but if you go up, you're kind of like increasing the surface area somehow, they say. So holding the coil down and just kind of smooshing up. Maybe smooshing down a little bit in places too. So this is a fairly thick coil for the size of pot that I'm making, right? You can make coils, half the diameter of your pinky finger, like, really small, and build that way. But if you do that, you can only build up so high before the thing starts to get kind of weak. I think it's a little better to start out with a slightly thicker coil and then thin it later, and thin it by pinching, kind of like you did with the bowls. You're not going to throw. Okay, so then next coil, that's where the first coil started and ended, so I'm going to take the next one, I'm going to offset it a little bit so that those seams aren't in the same place. I'm going to smush it down. I'm going to lay the coil slightly inside the other one. If I lay it right on top of it, it's just like everything else with clay, it just wants to get wider. So I'm going to kind of prevent that from happening by laying it slightly on the inside. And then I'm going to do exactly the same thing, incorporating the coils together, smushing down on the inside, getting those nice and even. And this is where going up makes sense, because that other one's kind of slightly inside. Doesn't matter which way the wheel's turning, by the way. This is just how it's working for me. You could use this tool. This actually might be a little better, easier on the outside to do this. So I'm doing that kind of quickly, but take your time. Get things really nice and incorporated. Okay. Do it again. Make this one a little narrower. Has anybody rolled a coil like that before? It's a good new trick. Sweet. Seams cleaned up nice. Kind of like this. I'm going to do this again. Traditionally, if you're working with like really large forms, there would be this step of the coils would be a lot bigger, and the form would be a lot bigger, and then there would be a step of paddling. These pieces aren't big enough for paddling. It doesn't really make any sense, but coil building large jars, there's what they call an anvil, which is basically just a piece of wood that's kind of round like that, and then a paddle. You put the anvil on the inside, and you smack the pot, and that thins it out and incorporates the coils together a little more. If you want to see that, like, really impressive version of that, look up, like, go to YouTube and find, like, ongi, O-N-G-G-I. Those are Korean fermentation pots used for making like, kimchi. You'll see some really cool videos of people making kimchi pots doing that method. Okay, I'm going to do one more, and then I'm going to get on with it. I won't be able to hear that on the video. Like, why is he doing that? All right, last coil. So that was quite a bit of clay that I got. A pound might be good. I can go get the scale if you want. Just checking the thickness, doing a little bit of pinching, kind of like we did on the T-bowls. Get it uniform. Feels pretty good. Okay, so inside, I missed the spot, but inside, try to get it nice and smooth. If you didn't, go back and fix it. Cool. Here's the fun part. All right, so if you don't want to do the throwing, continue on as we did with the T-bowls. We're working with less clay, so you can get them a little bigger, taller, and thinner than we did with the T-bowls. I would try to get the height of this like up to here maybe, and you can kind of like belly it out at the bottom so it's a little wider at the base, so you have like a narrower foot, so you don't have to carve as much off. So that's totally legit way to finish off a coil pot. You could make it big and thick and carve it, like we did with the Kerniki. Do some texturing on the outside. That's totally cool. I'm going to finish it doing a coil and throw. All right, so this part gets a little bit like SeaWorld-y. Fair warning.
Okay.
You might get a little wet.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Fairly centered. Enough, right? So all I'm going to do now is just moisten the pot. If you are a right-handed person, the convention here in the United States is for the wheel to turn counterclockwise. And if you're left-handed, it would turn clockwise. In Japan, depending on the region, but for the most part, they throw the opposite direction. And the reason for that is that this way, your dominant hand is using the tool on the inside of the pot, and the inside's the most important part, the service end, right? So that's what you see. And you can always trim the outside to look different. So emphasis on the inside. So I'm going to throw US style, American style, Western, whatever. Try not to load it up with too much water, but get it nice and moist. Fingers nice and moist. Give it a nice spin. I'm just going to start by taking my fingers, offsetting them just a little bit, and gently squeezing and raising them up. Okay? And this wheel's got a lot of weight, so it's got good momentum. Kind of pull all the way. If you need to like pull, stop, gently release, don't come off too quick, and then go back, pick up where you left off. Continue thinning. So I've got my hands braced together. That's pretty important, because they're more stable if they're braced together. I've got my elbows kind of locked into something to give that some hand stability. I'm just kind of slowly going up, thinning out that material. If you get a bunch of water in the bottom, you can take that out. Alright, now I'm going to shape it. So I got some of the height that I want. Let's shape it. So I'm going to kind of press out the base to widen it. And then continue on up. That diameter. A little wider. So this isn't going to look like, you know, bone china teacups, right? It's got a kind of a movement and a character of its own because of the method. So you can try to make it perfect, but it's a fool's errand, this method. So, you know, embrace it. There. Let's make a nice little teacup. You've heard the term wabi-sabi, right? Yeah. It's a terrible joke, I'm sorry. This is wobbly-sabi. Embrace it. Okay. We'll call that good. That's about as thin as I want it, and about as wide as I want it. So you can leave the rim kind of funky like that. Or you can trim it. If you want to trim it, there's a couple ways of doing it, but I would recommend using one of these hearts. And with the heart, just be really intentional. I'm gonna just drop it down and hold it, and then lift it back up. I'm not gonna be like trying to move it around or worrying about things. I'm just gonna kind of go whoop and lift, okay? And that'll take off the top and get it back to level-ish. And then you probably want to do something with the rim because something square on your lips doesn't feel very good. So I'm just going to take and soften that rim, kind of give it a bevel, so just kind of like that. Cool. Let's get some of that and your remaining water out. Get out the inside. So now I'm just going to do some simple surface decoration. I'm going to use the wooden knife to do this. These two, and actually the other one too, were slathered with a really thick slip. Some clay that was mixed up. It's kind of like a spackle consistency. And I have some of that, if you all want to do that. If you're interested in that, I can show you that part of it too. But it's basically just taking a metal rib or a plastic rib or something, loading it up with a bunch of slip and kind of spackling the pot.
Does it have to be day one dry or week one dry?
For spackling? I would spackle now. You could do it either way, but I think you get a more interesting effect when you do it wet. When it's firm, the pot's already kind of set up and it doesn't respond to that slip application. So like the one on this cup here, the wood-fired cup, it's not round, it's kind of got these flat sides to it. It's got, I really aggressively put the slip on and then I spun the wheel and made it kind of roundish again. If it's already firm, it's just going to be kind of round and boring, and it'll look like slip was applied instead of it being like integral to the thing. Okay, so I'm just going to do some simple fluting, and I'm going to do 5, because odd numbers are better. Leave it kind of wonky like that. I think I will, but maybe I'll touch up the rim a tiny bit. So the rim is kind of roundish, but the body is no longer quite as uniform. I really should have pressed in a little harder. Yeah, that's better. Way more interesting. And if you're not into that, that's cool. And then the last bit, you can kind of give yourself a little head start by trimming up the base a tiny bit with your wooden knife. So I'm just kind of taking the knife, cutting edge towards me, so it's spinning into the cutting edge, and just kind of dropping it down. And then take a tiny bit of water, run some water down between the pot and that little slice that I made. Slide the knife under it, and then that little bit will come off. So this is nice for 2 reasons. It means you don't have to trim as much later, but also when I'm trying to get the pot off the wheel, crack in the rim that I'm fixing, then I have something to lift with. Okay, don't touch it too much. Then the wire, so you take the wire, you put the toggles outside of your hands, thumbs down on the wire. I'm going to push down and away from me. And it should slide. If it doesn't, you put a little bit of water on the wheel. Do the same thing again. Definitely slides. And you can just use your fingers to pick it up with that little handle that you made. And then put it on a wooden board and do it again, or hand off the wheel to somebody else.